ladies and gentlemen, keep on our Twitter handle because we want to hear from you as we move forward to the next two segments. Like I said, we unfortunately don't have Richard Mosley here this morning, but we're more than making that up to you with a very nice, very well-planned panel discussion presenting some of the best minds we have within India Inc. So the next session is essentially called Delivering on the Promise, Talent Management and How It Impacts Your Employer Brand. And to help me discuss this theme, I have the pleasure of presenting to you our very first speaker on this panel. Put your hands together for Prabir Jha, CHRO of the Reliance Industries, thank you very much for making the time at very short notice. They've all really been wonderful to help us bring this panel together. Thank you, Prabir. Next, someone who's just so passionate about marketing, branding. I must say a lot of us learned that on the job. Someone who's the master of having created several employer brands. Put your hands together for Adil Malia, Group President HR at the SR Group. And last but not the least, I told you this was going to be a treat. Adil, that's the moderator's chair, so we need you there. So you get center stage. And let me, last but not the least, invite the third speaker on this panel, the very outstanding, the very erudite, the very articulate Rajesh Padmanabhan, CHRO of the Vedanta Group. Please put your hands together for Rajesh Padmanabhan. Rajesh. We're going to need one more mic here. So we've got one mic here. We're going to need one more mic for them. Right. So like I said, this was the theme on which we were going to have Richard speak. We're going to make that into a panel discussion and then, of course, open up the dialogue to be able to welcome questions from the floor. Delivering on the promise, talent management, and how it impacts your employer brand. I mean, I'm a little intimidated conducting this session because, all you gentlemen have such outstanding experience in having contributed towards building great employer brands. So what I'm going to do here is, can I have my very first slide up? All right, I'm going to read out a statement to the three of you. Employer branding can be used as a long-term talent attraction, management, and retention strategy. It is a perception management program that is intended to raise the organization's image as a well-managed business to attract a flow of top quality talent over time. So, I'm obviously preaching to the converted. You know about this. I'm using a Kelly research statement to be able to make the point. Now, my question, and I'm Rajesh going to point this out to you first. Should employer branding be the strategy for managing talent, or must managing talent over a sustained period help you build an employer brand? Should the tail wag the dog? Should the dog wag the tail?
Are there any scribes around? Because the answers could be different. No, I think I would go for the second one. I guess I would tend to go with building an inside-out talent brand, because I'll tell you why, the reasons. When you get your basics right, when you do a few things right, and when you start putting the fundamentals and the elements right, I think you build a brand, and it becomes easier for you to take it out externally. So I would go from an inside-out story, though eventually what sustains in the long run is a holistic approach to brand building. Not that the outside in is not a right approach. It does good amount of work for a startup or for a positioning standpoint to define the purpose, etc. But I would more go from an inside-out approach. Yeah, I can elaborate, but I'll possibly hold back.
You're right. I'm going to move that over to Adil. Adil, what are your views on this?
So my view is like this, that number one is, your question says whether you're going to put the horse before the cart or the cart before the horse. Now, each one of us who has gone into the labor market, and we all represent great brands when we go to the market, Each one of us has pretended that we are great brands by telling the potential employees in the talent segments that we are a great learning organization, we are an equal opportunity employer, we offer fast career track movements for people seeking fast movements, we are a great company to work, cool for Gen X, built by Gen Y, and all of those brand positioning statements. And why do we put these statements? Because the prime intention of that is to be able to attract people quick into the enterprise. And that's where the folly lies. The folly lies is because most HR people, number one, falsely believe that employer branding is something within their domain. The folly needs to be clarified to believe that employer branding is not an HR perspective, it is an enterprise perspective and an agenda that the CEO of the enterprise needs to be driving as to how is the enterprise being perceived by the market in terms of the practices they run inside. And the second most important folly, not important folly, it's a second folly you see people believing is that once they have sold that so-called fake branding to the potential employees, they believe they don't need to be doing anything. Versus whatever is the perception you have created for the brand in the potential talent segments, you need to come inside and have a mill which is able to deliver to the value propositions. Now what if you were, and I constantly give this example, what if you were to buy a Fair and Lovely, apply it and find that it does not make you fair and lovely, it makes you rather dark and ugly. Certainly you don't want to be a foolish guy again to go and buy the same Fair and Lovely. So as a product attrites itself, as customers attrite when a product does not service what it proposes, organizational brand positioning will also happen similarly if within the system you don't give it. Therefore, it is very important for the enterprise to first have a system which has ability to deliver to the value proposition it wants to position itself, and then go and do the broadcasting of the brand.
Okay, so
That's
you're saying inside out, like Rajesh's. What's your view, Prabir? I mean, the future of employer branding is that it belongs with the brand management team. So if it belongs with the brand management team, you can well imagine what's going to happen because they're going to position this like any other brand that they're actually selling in the market. They may not rely on whether or not you have the mechanisms and the processes to deliver on the promise. What's your view on this?
So first is the simple answer. I would agree with Rajesh, that if I had to make a pick, ideally it is managing talent over a period of time because that's the experience. If the experience is not in line with the promise, there is no promise. So that's a simple answer. But just to kind of give a spin to what we are thinking, it's very important to also keep in mind the expression when you've used the term managing talent. You see, managing talent is a more longitudinal perspective. Now it also reflects therefore on what's the age of an organization, right? And what is the tenure an organization sees for itself. If you're a startup and you want to kind of, be bought out and, you want to kind of exit, the entire promise will actually be more addressing the first point because then how do you build a brand? And one of the ways in which you build a brand is by the kind of talent that you get. You hire 10 great guys, people start believing it's a great company and they attract another 50 such good people and then the entire thing happens. So I think it's very important to also be aware of the life stage of an organization. What is relevant? And therefore managing talent could be talent attraction or hiring in some cases. It could be actually moving people up the ladder. Given whatever promise and the business aspirations, are you diversifying globally in India? Are you diversifying businesses? So I think the expression will always have to be in the context of what makes sense to an organization. And therefore, while directionally the second is what will typically hold true, but given the age of an organization, I think it is possible that you focus on one because that's at least from where you get started.
In fact, Sujya, let me add one thing to you. There are 4 terms which are very, very critical. One is authenticity. Second is trust. Third is experiences of the employees with moments of truth when they are facing those things. And the fourth is endorsements. Unless and until there is authenticity in the brand that you want your potential talent to believe, pure authenticity, it's not going to last long. This comes from the fact that the employees within the organization trust it and therefore go back endorsing it, because when they came and had experiences with moments of truth, their experiences indicated that there is no schizophrenia. Because more often than not, enterprises suffer from what we call organizational schizophrenia, where the values and value propositions that they told people are not the experiences of people when they come across the actual processes and systems of the organization. And therefore, authenticity and trust are the very critical elements, which can happen only from inside out.
Okay, all right. I'm going to move to the next part of our discussion. And I know it's a little difficult to be able to read this up, but I'm actually building up to what I want to, is the point that I want to drive. Interestingly, we looked at the best employer list. Hewitt conducts, and we have great respect for the Hewitt organization and their engagement surveys. So we actually looked up the best employer list for 2009 and the best employer list for 2011. And what really struck us was, interestingly, because they do these benchmarking surveys every 2 years. So I'm going to ask the audience to stay with the screen. Yeah, you see the one for 2009, and you don't find Unilever's mentioned anywhere in the list. They're nowhere in the top 25. And you go to the 2011, and they're the #1 best employer. Now, I have an interesting piece of data to share with you. Interestingly, in 2010 and 2009, so 2009 study would have essentially been started in 2008. So essentially, it's a reflection of a 2008 process, which culminates and gets announced in 2009. For the 2011, for what would have possibly impacted 2011 study, we looked at what happened in 2010. And there is a very unique incident, and there's a fair amount of reporting which is in the public domain, which you're all welcome to read, which is interestingly, there's more than one source that indicates that Unilever's in 2010 is an organization that had the highest ad spends, right? And we have huge respect for the Unilever organization, and obviously I think there are many, many great CEOs the organization has produced, which is evidence to their great ability to be able to manage talent, which is not what we are questioning here. The point I'm questioning is, you have a best employer list for 2011 that has a #1 best employer who doesn't figure anywhere in 2009, and very coincidentally or otherwise, in 2010, the same brand happens to be the highest spender on advertising. My question is, the audience we're talking to, do they understand the difference between consumer brand and employer brand? Are we actually confusing the issue? Do we actually invest enough in our employer brand? Because it appears those who have a large consumer brand appear to have the large employer brand. What are your views on this? Prabir, I'm going to ask you to go first.
This is a very, very good insight. It's a great question also, so let me kind of think on the fly. I do believe that there is a huge value of being a strong consumer brand. There is no doubt about it, because 10 times you see something or you read something or you hear something, you start believing it's true. That is the reality of great advertising, and the rub-off on the employer brand is equally true. Having said that, I wouldn't necessarily believe that it is always an equation which works. Because first, there might be certain businesses, certain enterprises which are not really consumer-centered, but they have been known to be strong employer brands because of what Adil you mentioned. The experience of employees, the endorsement of employees, the reputation of the organization of building capability and leadership actually sets it apart. It may not be a great consumer brand, but having said that, in today's world with a lot of social media explosion, the ad spend is actually going up on every possible media, impressionable minds, and at least in India, the growing preponderance of the new generation to shape their own preferences, the rub-off is very, very strong, very, very strong. So I think a good consumer brand definitely helps an employer brand, but the absence, of course, if it's a bad brand in itself, then to be a good employer brand is going to be a big, big struggle. But if you're not a well-known consumer brand, you can still be a very powerful employer brand for the relevant talent catchment. I think that's the observation that I have.
You're right. Adil, your view?
There are two realities. One reality is we need to remember that your potential talent in the talent market is also your potential consumer in the consumer market. So he plays two roles. He's not playing one role. On the one hand, he is your potential talent because you're looking at the talent market. Simultaneously, the same person is also playing a dual role, that he's a consumer in the retail market. And secondly, whether you like it or you dislike it, actively or passively, advertising and marketing communication hits him hard when he's a consumer in the retail market, thereby having a rub-off effect on him when he's playing the second role of a potential employee in the talent market. Now this is advantage and disadvantage. Of course, advantages very obviously are very quick recall. You keep hearing Coca-Cola, Cadbury's, so-and-so, so-and-so, so-and-so. So your ability to recall the brand is very high. And then secondly, there is a subliminal belief that if a brand is good, the product is good, that means it is an outcome of good ingredients and good people management processes in the organization. So that's a subliminal belief. Good product is an outcome of good ingredients, and therefore also good people make good products, and that's a subliminal belief. Now that has a major setback. We seem to be forgetting that the moment a major retail brand has an impact in terms of anything else, its impact on the labor market is highest. I recall when I was the group head for Coca-Cola in Asia and the pesticide issue impacted it. I promise you, one of the best known employer brands for the next 6 months was unable to attract any meaningful marketing or safety professionals to join the organization because the sheer ability of that consumer brand to reach thousands of your potential employees so high as compared to take a BP which had a similarly and a larger scale oil leak which no one realized because it was in a totally different segment. So no one realized that that segment was impacted by a much bigger catastrophe, but no one knew about it, so the employer brand was not affected.
So you're saying the converse is true as
Absolutely.
well. Yeah, I'm going to pass that on to Rajesh. What's your view?
Yeah, with Adil and Prabir there, I've always learned to build objective responses because they have so much to share. It's always great to hear them more other than me speaking. I would tend to go directly with the answer and say there is a powerful confluence between the two. Absolutely. I would say that employer brands have got created because of a high impact consumer brand, invariably, the story so far. So that's the mother brand and then you create employer brands. That's the way history tells you. If it were to ever reverse, then your question would be valid. And I would see that trend coming as well. So what really holds good is the sphere of influence, the point of contact. These are the aspects that really build brands. And there is a huge confluence depending upon the industry you're in or depending upon the point of contact or the sphere of influence. I think these dimensions really interplay between the consumer brand and the employer brand.
Right.
In fact, Sujaya, my question is how many people, even in the audience, if you can show me with a raise of hands, have you ever heard of this company called Schlumberger? Quite a lot. How many of you know that the best known world HR practices are not from GE but from Schlumberger? Very few. Prince knows about it. And that is the reality of it. Most of us believe that GE is an organization because of its various presence in the retail markets and all other markets versus the best known practices in human resources are from Schlumberger. And that conveys the point that because some domains are not necessarily in the market eye, they don't get recognized so fast.
The mother brand still hallows the...
Right.
No, and I think just one more, I'm completely in sync with Adil, what you mentioned. See, this thing about employer brand, I mean, are we talking a democratic pole of an employer brand? Or is the brand as relevant to that talent catchment? So if you're talking about what an Aam Janta uses and you're looking at people who are going to be, door-to-door salesmen and therefore that's the huge majority, yes, employer brand, consumer brand confluence is high. But if you're talking of cutting-edge R&D specialists and scientists, it need not be a consumer brand issue at all, but for the relevant employee catchment, that company, example being what you mentioned, is a very outstanding employer brand. So I think the problem with not only employer brand, but a lot of perception is what we normally as laymen read and assume is not the entire truth. And I think it's very important for us to recognize that.
I'm glad you made that point because it links to the next part that I'm taking you to. Here is a very interesting study that the Corporate Executive Board put out where they bust very key myths to do with Generation Y. And one of the myths that they busted is that Generation Y needs a cool employer brand. I mean, the general feeling is that if you want to go and attract young people from colleges, whether it's the engineers or the MBAs and what have you, unless you're looking very Google, Google-ish, unless you're looking as exciting and sexy as the IT, ITES, FMCG kind of space, if you're in non-sexy industries like mine, I mean, how do you go and position yourself? And I think sometimes the view is, let's just bundle ourselves up and twist ourselves up into a knot, trying to look like that on those campuses so that you are able to attract, because essentially the segment you're trying to attract possibly could be the same. So they busted the myth saying, they researched this, they spoke to a large group of young people, and they've revalidated the fact that Generation Y is not looking, in fact, for a cool employer brand, and interestingly seeking the same things that their predecessor generations were seeking from an employer. So I want to know what your reaction to this is. What is your view? Should you actually, and you spoke about a talent segment, and you spoke about, building your employer brand to be able to attract a particular talent segment. Should it work as per talent segment? In which case, then what you're saying is contrary to what the research is saying. Should an organization that wants to look sexy to Generation Y revamp their brand and position themselves differently in these markets? Should the segment make the difference is the question.
My take is very different. I will move from dashboard to predictive. Next year, we are going to have Gen Z into the workforce, and we're talking of more than 100,000 entering the workforce. So possibly the world is going to see for the first time 4 generations in the workforce. I don't think one needs to create what you would, and having worked across different industry verticals, while you do some amount of branding, some amount of positioning for relevant catching, you don't alter the entire specs. The opportunity to coexist in a very disruptive kind of a situation needs to come into play. For example, fun as a value will need to be a key element across the 4 part of it. Technology will need to be a reverse mentoring kind of an approach. You need to have it in your culture. You need to have it in your values. That's going to be reality. We are talking of Gen Z, which has got an 8-second attention span that's coming into the workforce. So Gen Y, what we're talking about, a cool one, is also going to face a threat from a generation which is much, much more manifoldly disruptive. So there's a new challenge coming in, and Gen Y would never have anticipated this. Nobody knows what the magic bullet is. I don't think we should be really taking pot shots at this. It's a tough one. But if having lived through this, having worked through some of the workforces, I guess the opportunity for decision making from the top, and technology reverse mentoring from the bottom, surprisingly you will also find 2 major trends if you go down to research in Gen Z and Gen Y being reversed, and that's usually disruptive. The value systems are improving down. Number 1, they are born multi-skilled. They did not learn multi-skilling. So I think it's a challenge of creating a coexisting living. And I guess the sooner we get ready and try out a few things, possibly we are in a better world of tomorrow. Yeah.
Okay, Adil, your view?
I believe that the e-sociology that's changing is going to impact the entire workforce, irrespective of which sector you're going to be operating in. Whether you're operating in a sexy sector or a non-sexy sector, the people who will be employed by you will be uniformly impacted over a period of time by the same e-sociology which will be generally prevailing at a point of time. There'll be people using totally different tools. Their comfort with the tools of work are going to be totally different. Their style is different. Their language is different. Their work hour preferences are different. Their language is totally different. Their belief systems are totally different. Their belief in work ethos is totally different. And therefore, whether you want to, in the short run, whilst you are experimenting with multi-generation workforces in the short run, in the long run, when this sociology is going to represent 70 to 80% of the people working in your enterprise, at that point of time, suddenly abracadabra, you can't do anything to make your organization sexy for those people to come in and work for you. Therefore, if from now you do not systematically start preparing your enterprises to start reflecting these changes which are going to come in a slow pace, and you should actually be mindful of it that even in our sector, we are possibly the first company to go ahead and make all social media sites open in the system, versus the best and the most sexy brands in the country today, still in the name of IT security, are not allowing employees to access social media sites from their workplaces. Versus we, being a very classical enterprise in infrastructure space, have gone ahead and opened out all social media sites to employees to go ahead with it. Because the mindset is very simple. These are not going to be options available to you. Maybe for a short period of time it will still be an option for you. It is going to be a reality. Sooner you acknowledge the reality and try and redesign your work organizations to suit that reality, you are going to be a dinosaur in the IT park. Choice is yours.
Okay. Prabeer, your view?
You know, a lot has been said, but let me again look at it a little differently. Somewhere we believe in this statement that organizations live in homogeneity. The reality is organizations are not homogeneous. Employees as a category are not homogeneous. And I think somewhere in gross oversimplification and media hype, we miss the point. Every organization may have a bias for one kind of a cultural hue, but may not necessarily have the same culture across. Two people may be motivated in two very diverse ways and may coexist. I think the challenge or the opportunity that I find for organizations in this space is to be able to actually look at segments as reflective of the reality of the smaller segments of employee choices and preferences. If you are not able to kind of micro-segment and you paint everyone with the same brush, you will acquire a certain hue which will actually repel some set of people, or even if people come, they may not be the people who would want to stay there. Just the last point. Again, somewhere I think it's reflective of a generation, and I don't debate that point. You know, as a generation, things are changing, technology is changing, everyone is getting more tech savvy, gratification needs are directionally getting more here and now. But every organization will have to decide what works best for that organization at that point in time. You can have all the fun in the world, but the definition of the army looking for young talent from the same catchment will be different than what maybe a Google would want, or what maybe, you know, I've been a bureaucrat, so I know what the civil service. I would hate to find a complete yuppie guy, you know, doing antics in Badaयूं. He can't run a district. Right? So I think it will have to be very, very thought through, customized, and my belief is there is enough for every species of a potential employee to find his or her right place. If we can just stop getting the younger generation to think heard and behave heard, I think we will have enough of getting the right person in the right employer reputation environment that works best for him or her.
Great. We're going to come to the crux of the theme of this conversation now, and I'm going to move you to the next discussion thread. What, according to you, is the consequence of not delivering on your talent management programs? So, for example, if there's an organization that says it has a fast-track program to manage high-potential people, or it enables people who are high potential to not follow systematic kind of a growth process inside the organization. There are exceptions made for people who are high potential, and employees who do come in don't experience that kind of a fast-track program. What do you believe is the consequence of not delivering on some of these promises or brand propositions? My purpose of coming right to this crux again is because, interestingly, you know, I moderated a large CEO panel for SHRM last year, and we actually asked a group of people in the about 500, audience of 500, if you had an opportunity to be able to work for an organization that did not contribute to CSR, for example, and so while it kind of positioned itself in a market where commitment to the environment and to the society was important. And when you joined the organization, you found the organization reluctant to contribute towards CSR or did not do anything about environment and so on and so forth. Would you continue working for the organization if you had a lucrative compensation and a great incentive plan? And we asked them, how many of you would leave an organization if it was not delivering on what the brand stood for, but you had a lucrative assignment in that organization? We didn't get one single hand go up. And we turned the question around and we said, how many of you would continue working for an organization that was not delivering on its promise of the brand, but you had a great assignment inside that organization? And all the hands went up. So I want to ask you, when we talk about brand and brand promise, the people that we're talking to, does it really matter? Do the promises we're making and the propositions we're making really matter? Or in an emerging market, are people still concerned with their own compensation, with their own careers, and with what that organization can offer them for now? And they'd worry about the rest of those issues later. What is your view? Is this universal? Is it temporary? You think we're still in an evolution phase when it comes to really holding an organization accountable for the promise? I'm really coming down to the real practical issue of holding an organization accountable, because we can pay lip service galore to say if you don't deliver, people will leave. And the question I'm asking is, if you don't deliver, do people really leave? Prabir?
Again, it's about how much of time does an organization and an individual have. If you're talking here and now, definitely individual compensation matters. There's no doubt about it. Can you continue to believe that you get a subpar compensation and you have a great future because of a great talent management program waiting for you? Again, may not be able to hold its own. So the assumption is there has to be a threshold as far as the rewards is concerned. That's the reality of the market. The market is competitive and people will have distractions and pulls. So that's one part. The question is, even if you had a great rewards program, but you did not see a future in the organization with the kind of opportunities, challenges, growth, would the person not be distracted? My personal sense, and I might be wrong, but my personal sense is, while immediate returns are important and people do look for the right rewards, I don't think the larger thought on their own talent, progress, mobility, experiences has been lost out of. People think long term. People want to. The only difference which has happened is sometimes an organization is constrained by the way it is designed, the nature of its business, and the cyclicality of its industry, not to be able to play it out the way an individual may have wanted. This is a challenge that an industry or a company kind of goes through. But the fact is that I believe that a great talent management program consistently delivering to the best possible people. So there will be people who leave. Again, if you look at attrition, I've always believed that attrition by itself is not really the biggest alert signal, at least to me. Who is leaving? At the end of the day, if you have a little bit of your tall tail leaving because they don't think there's a good talent management program, they are not paid well, I'm fine. Because it actually allows you to, continually keep raising the talent bar. But if your better guys leave, even if they had an aggressive rewards program, I would describe it that they don't really see a future, and therefore the talent management program continues to be critical.
Okay, Adil?
So Sujaya, according to me, there are two things for which each person takes a personal call to be in the labor market. One is the economic reality, and the second is the psychogenetic value of doing a particular job in a particular company. So there is an economic reality because I am in the labor market, I want to earn my money, I want to be independent, there is a family, there is my personal needs, so there is an economic reality. And the choice to fulfill that economic reality with a particular company is taken by me depending on the psychogenetic value that particular assignment in that particular company delivers to me. Now, if the economic pressure on me was so much that it currently does not give me an alternative to consider these psychogenetic values, then I may continue for a while till I get another alternative which also fulfills that. So it is a question of what gets fulfilled. Now, attrition is not the only way in which you need to be looking at this entire problem. What happens when after you employ a person and the company is unable to fulfill the value propositions for which you hired him? Number one, you will start seeing a huge amount of confusion in the organization. There is going to be a chaos in the organization because there is going to be this dissatisfied, frustrated employees who are moving around, creating a huge amount of discord in the organization. There is going to be dissatisfaction. There is going to be disengagement. There is going to be low morale. There is going to be a huge amount of gossiping in the organization happening at that point of time. There is going to be a brand reputational loss. And attrition is one of the other factors, because attrition can be caused by multiple factors. So all of these, now it's good if in this condition, if an organization is not fulfilling the value proposition, it is good to have attrition, because people who are dissatisfied are leaving your system. The worst is that when people who are dissatisfied with the value propositions continue to stay in your organization in a state of disengagement because you are depending on them to create your enterprise value. So actually,
So you're saying don't worry about the ones who are going, worry about the ones who are staying.
if they are dissatisfied,
despite being disillusioned.
and that's the greatest worry you have in the enterprise.
Great answer.
So let me top it up.
Rajesh.
I'm not going to repeat what has been said. So just to top up on a few points, just to be very specific on your question, if you do not focus on the first one, I would assume you're running a company, you don't build institutions. I'm saying more from a practicing manager standpoint. Having said that, I would also tend to agree that compensation, as you keep looking down the organization at the base of the pyramid, when it's a commoditized game, when there are huge demand-supply arbitrages, the entire outsourcing market thrived only on that. Let's face it. The entire economic situation, the IT services and the outsourcing market thrived only on that. We may call a few hygiene elements that we created in terms of an employer and an institution, but that was the gene by which we really altered the landscape. So it's important. At the bottom of the pyramid, if you were to use a competitive set, not too much to choose between companies, compensation does matter. Yeah, but eventually when you want to sustain and build an institution, you need to focus on that, because eventually pay for performance and growth for potential is what it is all about. So if you were to pick up the three elements of recruit, engage and retain, you recruit with a promise. You engage by really picking up on the elements of what and how. That's what the employees see. The what and the how. What do you deliver and how do you deliver? They get to see the organization a little more closely. But retention comes into play only when they see the soul of the organization. That's the crux. The trust, the elements around the promise, the journey, the aspects around commitment to growth, all those elements come into play, and that's the soul. Unless you're able to demonstrate soul, you will not be able to retain and build an institution.
Right. So ladies and gentlemen, Prabir Jha, Adil Malia and Rajesh Padmanabhan, I think the gist of this is deliver on a promise of your talent management programs if you are interested in building a sustainable organization. Please join me in giving them a great round of applause for a fantastic panel. Thank you very much. We have a small token of our appreciation for you. Prabir, thank you very much for agreeing to do this at such short notice. I hope the audience has enjoyed this, and I'm sure they have. Small token to say thank you. Adil, we will give you the present anyway. Yeah, Rajesh, and of course a small thank you token to all of you. Ladies and gentlemen, round of applause for this absolutely outstanding panel that agreed at very short notice to have this round of a conversation with me, and I do hope we've been able to give you some great insights on delivering on the promise of your talent management programs. Thank you very much, gentlemen.